Thanks for joining us so we can get in trouble together. This is Jon Reed, Diginomica. This podcast is a collaboration with ASUG Talks, and it's a chance for you all to air it out and for us to answer your questions. Also, Jim of ASUG Talks, he has been busy compiling questions from attendees as well, so he's going to probably jump in during the podcast with some of the best questions that attendees have come up with. So if that doesn't intimidate you guys, I don't know what will.
Yeah, I just like the fact that I can actually poke at you. Normally you're on a television screen in front of me in one of our studios, and
you want to sit between us so you can elbow both of us.
Well, he put himself between you and I intentionally, so we didn't start arguing with each other.
Pretty soon you're going to be on a plane, and I don't have to worry about you poking me anymore. So anyway, you can see how things go between us, but we also like to debate the future of SAP. Just to set a little bit of context for the listeners here, we are on the final day of ASUG Tech Connect. Simultaneously, SAP Tech Ed is going on in Berlin. True to form, SAP has issued a massive news guide, which is actually more like a book. We have not been briefed on all of that news, but since this is an Ask Us Anything panel, if you want to ask us about any of that news, you're welcome to. We could try to riff on it, but just for information, we don't have full briefings on everything that SAP has revealed.
But I think, John, we also know that many of the customers, it takes them a period of time to digest all that news. So many of the customer base is still absorbing what they took out of Sapphire and ASUG Annual Conference earlier this year, even what they took out last year.
True that. But anyhow, now you got to think about Snowflake, because SAP and Snowflake.
That's a great announcement, because there are a lot of Snowflake folks out there. And so I think the fact that that's been added to BDC is a well-received piece of news.
So let's cut to the chase. Questions.
We're going to cut to the gym.
Does anyone have a question? No.
Wow. No one has anything to say.
Well, fortunately, gentlemen, I came prepared.
I want you all to ask questions, because it's going to be more entertaining if you do. So but we'll go with Jim for a sec. Jim, try to stump us with something good here.
Oh, I got a good one. All right, this is submitted to us this week. SAP's BDC narrative is centered around open data ecosystems. But historically, SAP has struggled to balance open and SAP-only approaches. What concrete steps is SAP taking to make BDC genuinely interoperable with non-SAP data ecosystems through real technical deliverables?
Well, he picked a doozy of a first one, didn't he?
Isn't that a question for SAP?
That's wow.
Well, let me answer the question that wasn't asked, which is, why is SAP doing this? And I think that's almost as important as how SAP is doing it. They're technologists. They'll figure that out. The why is more important. The why is a recognition, a long belated recognition that customers live in a heterogeneous environment and they need support for heterogeneity. And the only way for SAP to do that is to partner with the Databricks, the Snowflakes, and others to actually allow this third-party data to live somewhere that's not in an SAP environment. That's a legal problem, but is nonetheless something that's very, very accessible. So I think it's a really good, a good move on SAP to stop looking at the world as SAP only, stop pretending that everything can be wall-to-wall SAP, and actually allow for this non-SAP data to have a very strategic position and a very, I think, well-designed technology for accessibility.
The number one topic on ASUG Talks this year by download volume is the 2 podcasts we've done on BDC. And not just by a little bit, but by a significant percentage, as I'm looking over at our executive producer. So the BDC conversation for customers is very, very important. There's a tremendous amount of interest in it. And what I take away as the advantage of BDC is this idea of an end-to-end semantic layer that you can rely on as a customer to represent the data without having to go through extraordinary steps to ETL it to get to the data that you want. That, to me, is the fundamental promise of BDC. And I think that is a very important promise, that we can build much more resilient, faster data lakes and data around that without having to jump through a lot of hoops to interpret data. So I think that's the beginning of why this is important. To the question about, well, how do I make that interoperable with lots of other systems that I'm running? To me, the first huge opportunity is to make what you're taking out of SAP to drive other processes more easy to access, more resilient, more able for you to do important analytics against it.
I think one of the things is that customers have a lot of fatigue over SAP's rapid fire renaming, changing, and expanding its data platform. So I think the hope is that Business Data Cloud is the last of that for a while.
That's a good point.
And we don't have to hear about DataSphere Part 4 or whatever. And there were a lot of questions the last couple of days around how do I actually get to this new place, even if it's a good place, how do I get there? And, with BDC, I think it's helpful to step back from all of this AI BDC stuff and say, why are we doing all of this? And I think one of the big reasons is we want to make better decisions in real time with the best information that we have based on all the crap that's coming at us, whether it's inflation or tariffs or demand signals are changing fast, inventory levels are unclear because of lack of visibility. All of this factors into how we make decisions. And so BDC is an attempt to say, you can't make all those decisions just inside of an SAP environment. So,
You stole almost my entire talk track.
well, you're going to need a new one.
Okay. All right. I have to go with something new now.
All right.
I'm done for
New
the
question.
Any questions from the audience?
Well, we're going to call on some of the audience and members.
We might call on you like
we
this is
know
like
personally.
elementary school. You look like you're about to ask something. Come on.
I have one about DataSphere, continuing with your line.
Okay, well, we can do DataSphere if you want.
Okay. This question was also submitted to us. If we have SAP Analytics Cloud and SAP DataSphere standalone, how does SAP BDC impact that? And how do we get benefits of people intelligence without a full conversion?
Did you allow them to ask us licensing questions? You realize we're not legally authorized to answer licensing questions, right? That's a question for your SAP account executive. Would you like to take a shot at that?
No, I like your answer the best, which is I'm going to graciously bow out of that. I think you have to look at this through the lens of value. And is the BDC journey worth the things that you need to get done? And how do you take the things that you did potentially in SAC or in DataSphere and move them to a new frontier? And I think SAP has done a good job of trying to, as best they can, explain that journey.
All right, audience, I want someone to ask me a question about RISE.
Before we get to RISE, though, can I just say one thing about that? So I'm an advocate for, stepping back and looking at how you're going to compete in your industry going forward before you even talk about SAP at all. And I think in the context of something like BDC, the next question becomes, what kind of data do I need access to and why? And so the question is, well, why would I use BDC when there's so many other tools I can use? And so I think it's important to listen really carefully to what SAP is saying about BDC. SAP is making the argument that they can provide you the best context for your decisions that you're going to get from any data platform. It's up to customers to evaluate that. And from a licensing perspective, to figure out if it's going to work for me.
If it's worth it to you.
Exactly. And we can't answer that question, unfortunately. That's above our pay grade, I think. So Josh wants a RISE question. So
Yeah, but I don't need one. I can riff on that for a second. But
do you want a modern RISE question or a private cloud question? Because now RISE means
It almost
something
seems,
different
Josh,
than
like
it
you
is.
have a question.
well,
You can ask a question if you want.
okay. How many customers in the audience are RISE customers today, right now?
These are
Like,
customers that have
hold on,
risen.
stop, hold on. How many of you are?
That's around 10%, I would say. Yeah, 10, 15.
How many are happy RISE customers who, if given a beer and a sandwich, you'd come up here and tell us your great story about RISE? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're
Seeing a little bit of gap, Josh. We call that leading the audience.
That's called trying to make a point. I wish.
depends on the sandwich, I think. If it's a
right,
really
the
nice sandwich.
Right. The sandwich
I think we
is,
get a pretty
yeah,
good
maybe
endorsement.
not a Louisville Convention Center sandwich. Maybe.
So here's the question then, the follow-up question, since we didn't pick up on that enthusiasm. What do you think is tripping customers up from saying, I love me some RISE?
Well, and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, so let's divide the world between, public and private cloud and
Let's talk about old school RISE, private cloud RISE.
yeah, private cloud RISE. And we're not allowed to talk about licensing and the complexity of licensing, but that's a problem. It's not easy. It's not simple to get involved in RISE. I think that a lot of the customers that I have talked to, I think in the early days were sort of more forced into a RISE agreement than they really wanted to be. And I think I see someone shaking their head. Yes, thank you. We got some acknowledgement on that. I'd like to say, honestly, I think SAP has done a good job of evolving RISE to be a little more customer friendly. But I think the the question always was in my mind, for whom is RISE really designed? Is it designed to benefit customers, or is it designed to benefit SAP? And I would argue, unfortunately, like a lot of things that get started in SAP and on the commercial side, not the technology side, the beneficiary tends to be more SAP at the beginning, and then they start to figure it out. Quite honestly,
Josh, may I quibble with you?
By all means.
So I'm going to say that I believe and I agree with you that the maturation of the RISE product has gone exceedingly well for SAP, and we've sat down as ASUG with the leaders of that product and talked to them even as much as maybe a month ago, and I was really impressed about how much that product has gotten better. To me, what I think about is we as customers, in order to innovate faster, need to be able to move as much responsibility for system maintenance back to the vendor. If we are responsible for maintaining environments, if we are responsible for making sure all the stuff is there, then we're not paying attention to our line of business peers who are trying to innovate and will innovate around us if we don't innovate with them. So to me, the concept of RISE continues down this path of SaaS, where we need to think about how do we unload all of this overhead we're doing, get out from behind our screens so that we can get with our customers and innovate. Because if we can't innovate, they will innovate without us. And I think that's where we're getting held up. Every time we do a chapter meeting, we ask, where are you spending your time? How are you spending your time? And most of it that comes back in the data is most of our SAP professionals, all 130,000 of them inside of North America, are spending way too much time maintaining systems and not enough time innovating them. And that, I think, is why RISE to me is ultimately a thing that needs to be investigated, because it gives you the opportunity to get some of this stuff out from underneath you.
So I got to agree and then bring some heat on this. The thing that I like was in the opening keynote, Stefan talking about acknowledging those points around that gap and how tools like Cloud ALM and the supposed integrated tool chain can help you essentially manage your transformation efforts in an observable way. And I think when you combine that with RISE, it starts to be a lot more compelling. However, I want to hear more stories about how Signavio and Cloud ALM actually work together instead of hearing about the gaps between them, for one thing. And also, in this day and age, it just doesn't make any sense to me that you would have a situation where assigning responsibilities between vendor hyperscaler and SAP would require a spreadsheet. Why haven't we thrown AI at that problem a long time ago? So my thing with RISE is it's not complete yet, because I want to hear stories around how easy this is. I don't want to go to a gathering here and hear customers telling me how hard it is to manage those environments. So I think SAP has a ways to go.
And I think that, Josh, you brought up a topic a few minutes ago. To me, from an ASUG perspective, the ideal end state for every customer is public cloud. Now, I also am going to recognize that is largely unattainable for most customers for a lot of really, really good reasons. But I'm going to come back to the central premise. What I would like to see the SAP community be able to do is spend more time innovating and less time maintaining, right? Because that maintaining is unfortunately a non-value added activity. And I think public cloud is ultimately the gateway to ensuring that we as IT organizations can spend more time innovating and less time maintaining, which means we also have to figure out a way to decustomize, adopt standard. And I'm laying out a very aggressive future view of this, because I'd like to see us do more to move to that than maintain legacy private cloud environments that are riddled with customizations that we're not sure why they're there. We're not sure if they're adding value, and we're perpetuating them because we just don't know how to unwind them from the business. And to me, the biggest challenge foundationally is not IT and customization, it's change management and convincing our line of business peers to accept a different way of doing business that is a software standard than having to, you as IT professionals continue to recustomize over and over again what you're trying to do.
All right. Any questions? Surely we provoked something here. I thought so. Yeah.
So my experience is it's always hard to get the first question. And after the first question, then the floodgates open. So although I'm an SAP employee, I'm going to ask a first question to give you guys, hopefully, a floodgate of questions. I'd be interested in you mentioned Signavio. A lot of the things we're hearing is AI. I'm wondering. Yeah, exactly. You said it.
Yeah.
I said it, not me. How much are customers talking about, or the people you're talking about processes? Because I think we're seeing a lot of talk about technology and hyperscalers. You mentioned a whole bunch of things that are all, kind of the nuts and bolts of things. How much are you hearing people talking about processes and business processes and revamping them in the context of AI?
That's a great question.
Not enough.
Not enough.
But again, it depends on the audience you're talking to, right? And I think one of the things that if we look at, let's start by blaming Rise. Rise being sort of the flagship.
Yeah, let's throw Rise out of the bus again.
Yeah, right. I'm going for it.
You are on a roll today.
Flagship marketing, go-to-market strategy. The thing that's on every slide and every keynote is Rise. What has Rise really been focused on? ERP. What is ERP really doing for the line of business stakeholder in the supply chain, in the HR office, in the operations office? Not enough. And their notion of what is a business process is one that at some point sort of touches ERP, but is much more directed to what they're doing in their day-to-day job. So I think part of the problem of a process is that we're sort of having a dialogue with the wrong audience about the wrong ideas. I think we did. Let's plug it. John and I did a workshop. I see Todd here was part of that. A few more folks yesterday where we started breaking down some of these walls between technology and process. Sat down with some actually enterprise architect folks and discussed what is a business process, what is the case for a business process.
Josh, that's really supposed to be the magic of the SAP suite, which is about automating business processes. And I think if I kind of tease out that question a little bit, we spend a lot of time on the how, not necessarily enough time on the what and why. Right. And I think it's a good point. We need to spend as SAP professionals more time on how do we think about these processes? You made a great point about, the modern day of uncertainty, the modern day of a lot of things changing. And if we're buried behind mountains of customized code, there's no way we can shake and move and shimmy when all this unknown comes flying at us. Right. And, there's more change in the environment than there's ever been. And we are probably less prepared for it. And I think back to business process, Josh, that's where it starts.
Well, and the thing I think is happening a lot with AI is that AI is forcing these conversations. So you have an executive team that says, what are you doing about AI? And this gets you feel the heat.
We could dedicate a whole 35 minutes to the AI topic.
Well, right. But the point is it's provoking a process conversation because you start to figure out like what's not working and what's broken and what's in the way of actually having AI. Because AI, you can't sprinkle AI on top of broken processes and bad data and get a result. And so it's forcing a second look at those topics, which I think is really important. And that, to me, is maybe my favorite thing about AI. I saw you looking at your watch. That makes me nervous.
We're running because the timer is quick.
We're running low. Did you have a killer question from?
And you got a wrap up question, don't you?
I do have a killer question. Should we go down the?
Where we got
Oh wait, one right to I know we are running short on time here, so I'll be quick. I represent Suncor Energy, Great White North, Canadian friend, Canadian brother. My question around is the whole data monetization that SAP is coming along with. So to build some context, we are 30% SAP data, 70% is non-SAP data across the organization, right? So we had the ODQ data running for us for multiple years. And then all of a sudden, a year or 2 years ago, SAP came along and said that go along with DSP. So how ethical is that I need to pay for my own data? So if I need to ship data from my SAP stack outside the SAP world, which is ADF, Microsoft ADF, I'll be paying egress cost out there. So essentially, I'll be paying for my own data. So from a data strategy perspective, how do you see at that?
So, listen, I think the ethics term is a little bit loaded in this context. I understand why you're saying it, but I would argue the entire AI economy is an unethical quagmire of irresponsibility, starting with all the companies you could name, OpenAI, Anthropic, all of that, and essentially all the data they've stolen to train their models. I'm sorry, but they've stolen it. That's the way it is. But as far as how I look at it from an enterprise vendor standpoint, I do think that in general, if it's your data, I would be very careful about working with vendors that are trying to monetize your data without demonstrating significant value performed on that data. And that's a different conversation, right? Because if a vendor takes your data and provides you with a transformed value in that data, then I think they can legitimately make the argument that they should charge you for that. But just access for that data, I'm against that. And I think the vendors that try to monetize data, I think it's a fear-based response to the current economy. And I don't think it's going to hold in the long term. In the short term, I think customers need to make their own decisions around which vendors they want to work with and which ones have the best policies around that. And part of that evaluation comes in, how well is this working? How am I able to access this through APIs? Do I need more services? And so I think that's a very individual customer decision. Anyone want to comment?
I follow in your shoes, which is that if you just need your data out of that system, that's your data. But if that data is being processed and SAP is adding value to that information, then they have a right to be, compensated for that value. And I think one of the challenges we historically run into, and, I'm going to go back in a number of years, ASUG was very involved and engaged in some of the original digital access conversations that we were having with SAP, and those processes still are in place. We are always doing a lot of further processing on data. It's not quite that simple that I'm going to take a customer record and just export it out. I'm also going to do something to it as it goes out. And then who's doing, to your point, Jon, who's doing that work and how is that work being done? There's been some other vendors who I think have been very reckless and said, yeah, when you put that information at SAP, it's free to you. And no, it's not. And you said that, and then you misled the customer to think that, hey, they can do this work and they get to charge you for that work. But as soon as you move that data into SAP, that's all free, and it's not. And so I think there's been a lot of blatant mischaracterizations along the line. But you're touching on a very complex topic of how is this stuff all happening?
It's a very potent question. If I can just add one more thing, your question is one of the reasons why we're here at this event, because user groups like ASUG are one of the reasons why SAP has a different kind of ecosystem. And hopefully we can have these conversations and as a group collectively amplify our concerns more than an individual customer could on their own.
I want to turn that coin on the other side and just say that in addition to the problem of what happens to your data and who are you being compensated, the question of how you are being charged for the use of AI, the metering question is one that I think is really important. We brought that up to Walter Sun yesterday, and I think it's incumbent on SAP to make it very transparent what you're being charged, as opposed to, and in addition to what the value is you're deriving. The two are,
and that challenge is across all of the other places that you as an organization are spending money on IT. Like, how are you getting charged for hyperscaler time? How are you getting charged for all this other stuff? Jim, bring us home with one last question.
Thank you. Should we
there might be one in the back over there?
We got one more over here?
One more question.
Perfect.
Just one more.
There's a question. Okay.
This is more directed towards you, Geoff, and one of your comments about trying to get everyone to go more vanilla. How do you respond to SAP working in so many different industries? And even within industries, there are some very specific requirements that we have to meet. And how do we as an IT staff go back to our business area and says, that's great. You want to be able to meet all your regulatory needs, all your needs for the customers, but yet yet I'm being told I have to go vanilla.
You are spot on. And so the big hole and gap in my argument to go public cloud is the fact that not every industry's needs and wants are well represented in the product, which is why we as ASUG are asking SAP to do even more to put that functionality in on industry by industry basis so that we can get there. Again, I'm trying to describe an ideal state, and I know in many ways we are not there.
We all want to know this question. So
we are not there.
This is a really good question.
But I think why I think the word influence has come back so strong inside of the ASUG community is to work with SAP to prioritize these and changes that need to be made on an industry by industry basis. And we've heard some commitments from SAP around certain industries to make more and more investment in the public cloud structure to represent the requirements of the industry. To me, that is the pressure that we need to bring, right? Because ultimately, what I look at is all of you working inside of SAP every day. And I want you to be able to get out from behind your screens and go spend time with your business partners talking about how to innovate. And if you're maintaining legacy code, you're not doing that. Yes, I am being very, philosophical about it, but I'm trying to drag all of us to that.
I think it's a two-pronged thing, though, because it's important to continue to push this with SAP. And there are gaps in the public cloud in certain ways for sure. But it's also important for customers to push themselves on whether the public cloud works for them, because I documented Western Sugar as a manufacturer and how they've been exhorting other customers to take a harder look and don't be afraid of the public cloud. And they're a manufacturer and they have serious manufacturing requirements. And it's not as vanilla in SaaS as it used to be because of extensibility frameworks. So in SAP's case, that's BTP. And in many cases, you can build compliant extensions on BTP that fill in certain industry requirements. So I would push back a little bit on the notion that it's entirely vanilla, but I think your question is actually pretty crucial.
Great question.
We all have to talk about this.
And let me just add one thing, that the roadmap for industries is very much targeted at putting that functionality inside BTP, not inside the public cloud itself. So the whole concept is that industry specificity will be accessible to anybody because it's not part of a private or public cloud ERP. It's living there as a BTP accessible function. So the concept of I can run in a vanilla public cloud and have a lot of really great industry specific functionality is definitely in the roadmap, and it's happening already today. So if your functionality that you desperately need in the public cloud isn't there, you have a user group that can advocate for you to get that going.
Jeff, what are you doing about
that?
Yeah,
Jeff.
I think we're doing a lot around this.
You are, no kidding.
But again, I think there will always be, and my perspective on this is, you are never going to run a 100% vanilla system. That is an unattainable goal. But are you really making those customizations for those critical pieces of your business that are really different, and really protect those versus all the other? I mean, every year that a customer's on SAP, the list of customizations continues to grow, and we've got to figure out a way to make that shrink. And otherwise, we're just never going to get out from behind our screen.
And are you working with partners that know how to build extensibility and challenge you on, no, you don't need to customize that, instead of, oh, we'll take your customizations and happily bill you, and you can create technical debt all you want, and then it's not our problem anymore. We won a Pinnacle Award. That's awesome.
I just feel we just scratched the surface, Jim. So bring us home.
Save it for a podcast to be continued.
There's a lot of great stuff here.
So listen, Jim, you got a bunch of additional questions. So we're going to have to do.
We will do a follow up with a lot harder ones than the ones I threw at you guys. Maybe
those are pretty hard.
I'll give you a peek beforehand before the next one. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us.
Sorry we ran out of time, but thanks a lot
for everyone. Thanks.
But we do this on a semi-regular basis, so definitely check out our podcast, and we'll keep doing it.